I've done a lot of silly topics on the Ocarina of Time. Most of them is express hatred towards a certain fish, or maybe a terrible craftsman. But I thought of a more unique topic to cover today. It's a good question for this game as it's a mystery to why it isn't concluded. You probably gathered from the title or the thumbnail that this is about the Light Temple and its absence from the game. For quick background, when you become an adult you must save the 6 sages from their own temples and you get a medallion as your reward. 5 of them are some amazing levels, the Forest, Fire, Water, Shadow, and Spirit temples. All sages are characters you've met along your journey. All feel very well integrated into the gameplay and the story. But a big key here is 5 levels and 6 sages. Of all the sages, the first one doesn't need saving. It doesn't have this complex labyrinth you must traverse to save him. It's just this man, Rao, the Sage of Light. He resides in the Chamber of Sages in the Light Temple. You meet him immediately after you draw the Master Sword, which was 7 years ago, which sounds confusing but makes a lot of sense if you played the game. Actually, I'm going to make it a little more confusing. You already met him as he's likely the owl. Yeah, apparently he's the owl that always gives you the longest winded tips throughout the game that has become completely infamous on how to not give tips. Yeah, it gets a little confusing. So as this sage doesn't need saving, there is no Light Temple to play through. No crazy puzzles to solve or enemies to beat. You just go to the Chamber of Sages and you've beaten it. I can't find anything concrete, but it does sound like there was a lot of speculation that the Light Temple was supposed to be in this game. It was scrapped due to some sort of game storage or time constraint. Nothing definitive, but it would have made sense that this game had a 6th temple which would have been the Light Temple. So that is the base of this video. It is all about the temple that isn't there. We're going to go over 2 questions in this video. Why was the Light Temple not included in this game? And what would the Light Temple have been like? I'd say we do a deep dive in them, but typically I get distracted doing one of those and make some kind of joke about how Call of Duty sucks. Which fuck Call of Duty, by the way. Let's get going with the video. So the first question to answer is, why was the Light Temple not included in the game? There is enough speculation that it was going to be in the game, so why drop what would have probably been an awesome level? And I think there's a few reasons for that. Not official reasons, all I can do is really guess here. And one that you see if you look up this topic is about the game's size. Ocarina of Time truly was a revolutionary game for the N64. One of the first third dimension games that they nailed the controls for. And it had some amazing levels in this game. Like to this day, I think the Spirit Temple is my favorite level there has ever been. But the game has a limited capacity for memory. You would like to believe the developers had many terrific ideas that simply just wouldn't fit in the game. That included more temples. Like heck, maybe some smaller dungeons like Ice Cavern or Bottom of the Well was gonna be bigger. And the Light Temple, like an addition to the Temple of Time, was probably something they thought of. But they didn't have enough space in the game to make it. And they may not have enough time for it either. It does sound like there was quite a rush to finish this game. Some things in development have to be cut to meet these deadlines. It wasn't formally stated, although for the Wind Waker they did, but not formally stated for the Ocarina of Time. But it's fair to speculate that it was the case here. So if those are 2 reasons why the level did not get in the game, the other debate is which would get cut. And the Light Temple would be a clear choice. If you think of all the other temples, they have well-designed levels and areas to explore. And they have that shining dungeon to cap off all those areas. For the Light Temple and Temple of Time, it's basically just the Master Sword and, well, then what? There could be a dungeon to explore, like some way on how to get to the Chamber of Sages would make sense, but isn't as necessary as the other dungeons. So if one temple would be cut, this would be the one. Could other levels have been cut if not cutting this temple? Maybe. But if I would bet if something had to be cut for this game in terms of space, then this temple would make some sense. So while it's hard to know officially why, there are some good enough reasons to guess it. So the next question is, what would the Light Temple have been like? I can't find any pre-development designs on what the game devs think it would be. You can find some guesses out there, but nothing official. So again, we're back to just guessing. But there are items to learn from this game and others. The most obvious being the Light Temple portion in Ganon's Castle. Not only does it provide a good case for the designers of wanting a 6th temple, the mini dungeon Ganon's Castle can reflect what it would have been. And it does feel like the most general theme compared to the other temples. Which does make sense. You would guess the designs like the Hyrule Castle, a Temple of Time. It's not this vast lake or fiery volcano. And many of the puzzles to solve were based around getting the 5 silver rubies. I would feel like this would have been a bridge dungeon between like the simpler kid dungeons and complex adult temples. As collecting the rubies isn't really as complex a puzzle as some of the other dungeons out there. Like think of how complex the layout gets in the Forest Temple after completing Jabba Jabba's belly. We actually had a side dungeon that had many collect all the 5 silver ruby puzzles to it. That would be the Gerudo's training grounds. There could have been several ideas for the Light Temple that were moved to that mini dungeon, mainly surrounding the collect the silver rubies. Now, sure, many of the puzzles didn't work because I think you needed the iron boots and hover boots for a lot of them. And the design would need to change too. You would not really see the Gerudo Fortress design, but more of a castle or temple of time aesthetics. But general ideas from the side dungeon could have been used for the Light Temple. Another good place to look would be the Spirit Temple. And probably gotta note too the Stone Tower Temple for Majora's Mask and the Earth Temple for the Wind Waker. A big section of this dungeon requires you to refract or reflect, not sure which one it is, light to solve several puzzles. It really helps when you get the Mirror Shield, the dungeon item. I do struggle to see that segment of the Spirit Temple not being in it and in another temple, but it makes sense with the Light Temple theme because it's all about manipulating light. And some of these ideas for the Light Temple could have been used in other games. Like, it was noted that temples were scrapped for the Wind Waker and used in other games. They didn't state it for Ocarina of Time, but it could have happened. And I think a great example of that is the Temple of Time from Twilight Princess. It would have played the same as there is a room beyond where the Master Sword lies, which leads to that dungeon. And you would progress through it to find the Chamber of Sages in Rauru. And heck, there's another idea from Twilight Princess you could take from it. Like in Arbiter's Grounds, at the very end, you come across the Mirror Chamber, which is the place that you have to keep coming back to in the second half of the game to deposit all your rewards from the final dungeons. Like, the Light Temple could have been like that, but with the Chamber of Sages at the end. Is it even possible to guess what the dungeon item or the boss would have been? Probably not. That could be a bit too hard. I got no idea what the boss would be. Maybe some superpowered Stamphos or something. As I mentioned a bit earlier, the Mirror Shield might make some sense too for the dungeon item here. I personally would feel weird if it isn't the Spirit Temple dungeon item, but it could make some sense. The Spirit Temple did have 2 items in it, but perhaps the dungeon item would have been the Light Arrow. It makes some sense, it's the most notable light-based item, and it's also not like this item is used a ton of this game, you just get it at the very end to help defeat the final boss. So this dungeon could have a use for it. There could be a bit of a problem. I would guess this temple is the first one, and you don't get the bow until the temple would be after, the Forest Temple. But that's more things that we have to figure out, because that's just it. This is all speculation. There's no official proof that they wanted to include a Light Temple, or at least from what I can tell. If anyone does have a concrete source, feel free to comment and make fun of me. Don't worry, it won't be the first time I'm wrong. But this was a fun topic to do a deep dive into, as it does feel like it's a key portion of the game that's missing. The game is still amazing, and everyone has a blast playing through it every single time, even if there is no Light Temple. But it's curious to think of what it could have been.